Have you ever seen a tall, lanky shadow figure in the corner of your vision? Perhaps you've seen it while you're trying to fall asleep. This experience is far more common than you may expect. Welcome to a topic that I've been researching for a few years now, the Stickman Phenomenon. Null in the Void. Before we jump into this topic, I would like to put out a disclaimer. If you are somebody who is prone to psychosis, paranoia, extreme anxiety, or uncomfortable with supernatural topics and phenomena, you may want to skip this episode and join me in episode 4. This episode of Null in the Void will have some background visuals. However, for my audio listeners out there, I will do my very best to describe the pictures to the best of my ability. As far as when what I would call Stickman began showing up, there is no real answer. I tried to research, but I have not found any dates in particular. However, during my research for this podcast versus when I originally researched this topic, I realized there's a lot more people talking about this than the last time. Since the history of this figure is a little hard to pinpoint, I'm going to be speaking about my experiences, my theories, and I'm going to share some stories that some viewers of the podcast have shared with me to share with you. So personally, I know a little bit about the Hat Man, I know stuff about shadow people, but this is a little different to me. Whereas the Hat Man is described as one entity with malicious intent, I don't really feel these way towards the Stickman. For the remainder of this episode, I'm going to be calling this entity the Stickman, as to not confuse it with any other phenomenon. So my first encounters with the Stickman personally began when I was a little kid. Now, there is a possibility that this can be a manifestation from my psychological state of stress, but I feel like the energy has to be coming from somewhere. When I was younger and I started encountering them, I was very scared because I didn't know what it was and it was very unfamiliar. I lived with just my mom, and there was an area of the apartment that I refused to go to, and when I had to, I would run, dash, grab my stuff, and leave as soon as I could because I would always see this figure. Typically, I saw these figures in times where my mother was in a low vibrational state, which I understand sounds new age bullshitty, but it's the best way I can describe it. I remember first seeing them out of the corner of my vision. They were very tall, they had no face, it was almost like there was some kind of smog with them. It's kind of how people describe Slender Men, except this had no distinguishable features, no clothes, no nothing. And it wasn't as menacing. It was intimidating though. As I was growing up, I recall different times where I would see what I would call ghosts, like people who have passed in my life, in my friend's life, pets, etc. But these stickmen felt very different. They felt otherworldly. And not in a way that they've passed on, more like an alien feeling or a parallel dimension. For a long time, I honestly thought I was going absolutely insane, and I didn't say a word about this to anybody because I did not want to be locked up. I figured I just must be cursed, this must be the devil, something's wrong with me. It started to happen more and more often. I remember laying in my bed and just seeing it in the doorway standing there. I didn't feel terrified, but I did feel scared. I remember kind of fiddling around with the blankets, but I didn't want to just put them over my head and pretend like it wasn't there. I wanted to look at the thing. I just remember staring at it, and honestly, I wasn't very afraid to die, so I figured I may as well just accept what happens and observe it, right? I don't remember every encounter I've had with the stickman in chronological order, but I do remember some key moments. Gradually, their interactions with me became stronger and stronger. Instead of seeing it out of the corner of my vision, it would be standing in my doorway. And then from then, it wouldn't just be standing in my doorway, it would be walking towards me. Except, they don't really walk, they glide, and I've seen a lot of people report this. At a very young age, I saw it come in and just hang over me and crawl over me and stare at me, except it didn't have eyes, but in a way it did. It was more I could feel its soul piercing into mine. I just stared at it and observed it, and in the state of mind I was in, I didn't have a lot of physical energy to be moving. This time, it did scare me, but not to the point I'm terrified and it feels demonic. I'm in a situation that I can't move, I don't have the energy, it's not an option to get up. This thing is right there on top of me. I don't know what's going on. I'm a little intrigued, but a little scared. I don't remember much after that, but I do recall having different experiences like this throughout my life. And it even got to the point where my friends would come over, stay the night, and tell me in the morning that they saw this thing. They would ask me to reassure them that it was a dream, and I would unfortunately have to tell them that me and other people in my house had seen the same figure. But as I got older, I tried to engage with it. Rather than tensing up and being defensive, I tried to question it. I started to do a lot of thinking. I dress in a way that a lot of people, especially down here in the South, don't agree with. They think I might be evil, worship Satan, do all these things. But in reality, I feel I'm actually a nice person. So I was thinking in regards to the stickmen, maybe they just look intimidating. Who knows? Maybe they can't talk and I'm just scared because it's something I'm not familiar with and it just looks intimidating. So I decided to ask it for signs, why are you here? I didn't really hear words, but I did feel like the energy was a lot more calm and I felt better about their presence. I feel I was able to put up boundaries with the spirit and ask it, hey, while I'm sleeping, I don't want you in my room. I don't want you in while I'm changing. And I realize this might sound insane to some people, but I can't do much more than just tell you my firsthand experiences because it is a supernatural phenomena. Over the years, I feel that it kind of evolved from an observer or watcher of me more into a protector type of figure. I felt comfortable going to sleep because I felt like the thing would be somewhere around me to where it could protect other things from coming in. Now, I do have some theories I've come up with, but I would like to save those until after I read you some of the submissions I got. I posted the closest photos I could find resembling the figure onto my Instagram story and asked people if they had seen the figure, and if they had and they were comfortable sharing their story, to email it to me. It takes a lot to be open and vulnerable about things like this, so I really appreciate all these people sending me their stories. Without further ado, let me begin reading them, and then I'll get into some of my personal theories on the Stickman. This one comes from Nenny. I hope I said that right. Well, I've seen that figure. It looked like the one you posted on Insta. It was a dark and cold day back when I lived in a small town. I was probably like 10 years old walking to catch the train, so it was like 6 in the morning. I saw that figure like a humanoid thing but very tall right beside the trash can, and after looking to the other side because I felt scared, I looked again and it was gone. This is a short one, but I will never forget that moment. Throughout my research on the Stickman, I have noticed when people first start encountering them, the encounters are very brief. It's like out of the corner of your vision. And I do agree, that thing is scary to see if you're not expecting it. Thank you, Nenny, for your submission. This next one comes from Parker. One time, I think closer to the end of 2020, my uncle had just died unexpectedly and it was a pretty dark time for my whole family. I was only about 11 or 12, I don't quite remember, but I had this dream where I was walking in the city of New York by myself and it was cold. There were people riding in carriages and wearing top hats, suits, petticoats, and scarves. I had kept walking around the sidewalk aimlessly and I had seen a figure in the distance. It was tall and lanky. I couldn't quite make out what its full appearance was, but I was so attracted to it for some reason. I had stopped in my tracks to see and almost admire it for a moment. A carriage had passed in front of me, and when it passed, the tall figure was gone. I started running towards where it was until I felt someone grab my shoulder. It had stopped me and turned around just to see my uncle. He wasn't wearing anything unusual. He was wearing a baggy white tee with some type of printed button down over it with his usual necklace and regular black slacks. No idea what shoes. I never looked down. I'd gotten so startled by his appearance, so I just stood there staring at him, unsure of what to do. I kept staring until I heard a loud bang. I had yanked my head to see what was going on, and by the time I looked back, he was gone. I turned back to where the commotion was, and it was just the carriage's horse going haywire. But eventually the horse calmed down. I stood in the middle of the street with a cloudy, smoggy sky, and then I woke up, and that's all I remember. Thank you, Parker. Actually, this is going to tie into one of my theories I'm going to get into later about possible deceased relatives / spirit teams, whatever you would want to call them. This one comes from Corey. Basically, when I was younger, around 10 or something, I lived in this centuries-old, raggedy, crumbly house, and I had the front room that looked out onto the street. I've never been able to sleep very easily due to being on high alert constantly because of family issues that I won't get into, but basically I would stay up looking outside the window, peeling my curtains back, leaning up against my bed frame where I'd see 3 to 5 of these standing across the street from me on the front lawn of the house across the street. To my memory, they never really moved and had no distinct features other than being very gangly looking. I don't know what that means. and deep black. I have a history of hallucinations and to this day still see, hear, and feel things that aren't actually there. So I don't know if the figures I always saw were a result of the stress I was under at the age, or if they were some funky aliens that refused to lose staring contest, lol. Corey also attached some photos of the Google Maps of the house across the street where they would see these shadow figures. I'm going to be attaching it here, and if you're an audio listener, it basically pictures an older house. Well, it looks older. I don't know much about architecture. And 3 big, tall shadow figure stickmen standing there ominously. Thank you, Corey. This next one comes from Anonymous. So the year before I started high school, my dad started to come up on some money and he was finally ready to move into a big house like he'd always been dreaming about. He found a huge plot of land for super cheap on an island on the north side of Jacksonville, Florida, right before I turned 14. I remember driving up there to meet with the owner for the first time. It was a long road of nothing but trees, trailers, and farms until we pulled onto the property. We took a long, windy driveway that felt like driving straight through a forest until we arrived at the house. Outside, we met a man named Ron. He was a retired doctor, probably in his early to mid 80s, with a kind demeanor. He welcomed us in and started with the basics of the property, the acreage, home amenities, etc., until he settled into his chair with a glass of brandy and really started getting into the history with the home. This was almost 10 years ago now, so I'll do my best with the details. He bought the land in the late 70s and had built it up completely. He told us the exact year that all those trees we drove through had been planted because he was the one who planted them. He also built the house, and this is where things get a bit interesting. He started showing us artifacts that he'd found while building the foundation of the home, like fossils and turtle shells, but more importantly, spearheads, carved bones, and what he presumed to be leathers. He told us how the entire north region of Jacksonville was once occupied by, and I hope I don't butcher this too bad, Timucuan, I'm so sorry, natives. Timucuan, natives, whose preserves had been zoned to the other side of the island, but they once lived on the very land we were about to call home. I remember Ron emphasizing to us how we should always respect the land, but he never really detailed why. He would just say it and then go back to telling us about raising each one of his kids in the house and how I would really enjoy living there. I remember finding it odd and wondering why he didn't want to pass the property he seemed to love so much down to one of his kids instead of selling it to a random family. But anyways, my dad bought the place and I never heard from Ron again. We started renovating right away so we could move in the summer before I started high school, which we did. When we moved in, it was still under renovations, which I absolutely loathed. Waking up to random men in my bedroom to flip a breaker switch is not exactly fun for a 14-year-old girl, I will say. So, I tried to stay with friends as much as possible. I remember the nights I did stay there, something always felt kinda eerie and off. For reference, the property is 48 acres if you include the marshlands, and our closest neighbors were a decent distance away, so naturally it was scary. But also, I couldn't shake the feeling of there being other spirits there besides me and my parents. Before this gets too long, let me get into my experience seeing what I've named the Shadow Man. So, I get sick very often. Don't ask me why, because the doctors don't seem to know either, but I do. One of these instances, I was only mildly sick, so I wasn't taking any crazy meds, just your generic cold and flu relief. I was probably 15 at this point, and the home renovations were over for the most part, so the only people home were me and my mom. I think my dad was out of town. I remember falling asleep feeling extra weird. I figured it was just the meds, but in the middle of the night, I shot awake and saw in the corner, obscured slightly by my bathroom door, an 8 to 10 foot tall shadow. I was filled with dread but unable to scream or move, so I just stared at him. I was scared, obviously, but at the same time, I didn't feel physically threatened by it. It was such an odd sensation that I have a hard time describing. I must have fallen asleep at some point because the next thing I know, I woke up to sunlight and the Shadow Man wasn't there. I started reeling at what I saw that night and slowly started remembering my cat randomly hissing at that corner a few nights before. I couldn't sleep in my bedroom for a while after that. I remember telling my dad, fully expecting him not to believe me, but he did. He said he hadn't seen anything, but he had also felt some kind of presence in the house and heard things moving or footsteps when no one else was home. Over the next few years, I developed my spiritual practice and made an effort to give thanks to the native spirits watching over the house, and I never saw anything like it again. However, we had a few very unfortunate things happen in that house very soon after my visit, quote unquote, with the Shadow Man. I won't go into details on that, but in short, I don't live there anymore. My dad still does, and when I go to visit him, I can still sense something there. I haven't seen the Shadow Man since. I don't think he was one of the native spirits. He felt like something different. I feel that he was tied to a lot of the misfortune that happened in my time living there, but I could be wrong. I still don't know what to make of it all, but I hope that you enjoyed my story. This is very interesting, and I feel like it ties in with a little bit of the stuff I was talking about with my own personal experiences earlier. And my experiences also happened in Florida. Maybe Florida really is just super cursed. Thank you so much, Anonymous, for sharing that story with me. This next experience comes from Jaden. Ever since I was a young child, I have always seen these shadowy things. I don't really have the proper terminology to describe them. I used to not be afraid of the dark until I started seeing them. I was about 4 and these gigantic things would just be there, and when I turned a corner, there would always be one in the hallway leading to my older sister's bedroom. It was about 7 or 8 feet tall and its head touched the ceiling. Sometimes it would be even taller. Its head would hang off at a crooked angle. I never really told anyone about it at all. As a child, I would be deathly afraid of that hallway. I would tell my mom I was scared and she would be confused and ask, "Scared of what?" It was that thing. For years, I had to deal with it. As I got older, the shock wore off and I am no longer scared of the creature. Still, sometimes it scares me, but it doesn't freak me out like it used to. I see other ones aside from the thing in my hallway. There is one in my parents' room, one downstairs, and sometimes I see one that is fleshy and bloody. They aren't really that scary anymore. I have come to see them as friends. They've never harmed me, although as a kid, they ran towards me. When I was about 15, I got some answers. Turns out I have bipolar disorder along with some other things. Bipolar can give hallucinations similar to what I see. It might all be in my head, but I swear it's real. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Who's to say? There's a lot of things we don't know about the natural world, but that's my story. Jaden also has attached a photo that they've made with a graphic showing the shadow man standing in the middle of the hallway with the brother's room to the right and the parents' room to the left. If you're watching the visual version of this podcast, you'll be seeing it right here. If not, you can imagine it in your pretty little mind. I have one more experience to discuss with you guys. Also, after that last one, my ring light has started flickering. It's a brand new one. It's not like it's not plugged in or anything. I just thought that was a little weird. I'll show you guys. I don't know if you can see that. Interesting. Well, that's fun, isn't it? If there's something in the room with us, can you wait till I finish the podcast unless you want to add something? This final story comes from Lily. So, hello, I'm Lily. I'm from Latvia and this is what I had experienced. So, I'm not exactly sure where to start, but this is what I remembered. I think I was around 6 or maybe a bit older. I'm not sure if I had started first grade yet, but if I had, then it was the holiday season, as I remember having to dress up in warm clothes the next day. I had woken up very early in the morning or during the night, I'm not sure, but it was pitch black. I think I had settled in my own new room, which had just been finished. I live in quite an old house, probably from the 19th century, which is now used as an apartment complex in the middle of my capital city. I'm mentioning this because the layout is very weird and it plays a big part in the story. So, back to me waking up. I was woken up by feeling very uneasy, which wasn't unusual since as a child I would get loads of bad dreams. I still do, but not as much. But my dreams have always been very bizarre. So my first thought was to turn on my bed light, which I wasn't able to reach, but as soon as I stretched out my arm, I got the chills all over my body. The ones you get when panic is about to set in. I just knew something wasn't right, so as most little kids would, they ran to their parents' room to sleep with mom, as moms are often safe spaces for kids. So here comes the layout of my apartment. My room is facing my parents' door, but it's around 20 meters away. I'm not from the US, so I don't know how much that would be, they say, but Google says it's 65 feet. Okay, it's quite far, but that's because I have to pass the living room. But right as you leave my room, to the left is the door to the bathroom, and to the right is a small hallway to the exit door and a smaller bathroom. My plan was just to run straight to my parents' room, but when I got up, I felt so scared I was walking on my toes. For no reason, really. As soon as I left my room, I hadn't started running yet. I felt the need to check the right side as I felt something was wrong. As soon as I looked to the right, the figure was there, and even though it was dark and clearly seeable, it didn't have a distinct face, and it was just standing there, looming over me. Then it started walking towards me, and I ran to my mom's room, already sobbing. I thought it was a bad dream until I woke up in my mother's arms, and her asking me why I was crying and shaking last night, which confirmed I had experienced it. The same day we had planned to go somewhere, and we were dressing up in the hallway where the door to to the bathroom is, and I was so shaky that I could hardly look at the door. I had told my mom what happened, and she told me I just imagined it. It was burned in my mind for a long time until I forgot about it, because nothing paranormal has happened to me these past years at all. But you posting this story made me regain all the memories back. Till this day, I'm still not sure what the hell I experienced. So I'm noticing a lot of common themes here, which I will discuss soon. But first, alright listeners, I need a minute to talk about something that's genuinely caught my eye and resonated with me very strongly. You know we're all about realness here, right? Well, I've come across a brand that embodies that very essence. Meet Houdini, born from the intriguing mind of artist Eric Houdini. Now, this isn't just your average streetwear or goth brand, no. Houdini is something very different. Their Season 3 collection, it's asking some hard-hitting questions about what it means to be genuinely rebellious in today's society. If you've ever felt disillusioned by brands that claim to be edgy but don't stand for anything, Houdini is your answer. Their designs, a mash of anarchist symbols, the dark reality of our current society, and raw truths. When you wear Houdini, it feels like you're wearing a piece of the revolution. And here's where it gets even better. Their online space, erichoudini.com, it's an entire world of radical thought, poetry, entertainment, and more. It's a brand that truly puts its money where its mouth is. I will say, I've spent a good chunk of time just exploring this website, and it's so fucking cool. Spoiler alert, I've gotten this artist to work with me on my own website that you guys will soon be able to explore. But yeah, this is a very talented friend of mine. I really enjoy this creator. You should definitely check out their stuff. Supporting Houdini means that you're not just getting unique threads that are fucking awesome, but you're also funding a space for genuine radical change. For those out there looking for fashion that truly stands for something, this is it. Look, I'm all in, and I think you should be too. Check out Houdini and be part of this movement. Trust me, it's worth the dive. You can shop now at houdini.rip and use code NULL for 15% off of orders $50 and up. That's Houdini, HOUDINI.RIP, and you can use my code NULL, NULL, for 15% off of all of your orders, $50 and up. Let's get back to talking about the Stickmen, but really, you should do a deep dive and look into Houdini's site. Even if you don't buy anything, it's really worth just looking on the website and getting lost. It's really beautiful and really cool. They put so much time into it, and it's amazing. Check out houdini.rip and wear the resistance. You can also see my collaboration with Houdini by going on my Instagram and looking at some of the most recent posts. You will see it right there, and it will also be on my website. Thank you so much to everybody who submitted a story for me to read today. I've really been looking into this topic for a while, so it's really nice to hear some first-hand experiences. I've come to see some similarities between them, between my own and also the ones that I just read. I noticed a lot of us have seen this figure most commonly when we're children. Now, I'm not Christian, but I was raised Christian, and my mom would always tell me something along the lines of children are the closest to God. Does this inherently mean that children are also the closest to the spiritual realm? To other parallel dimensions? Entities? What causes young children to see these things? I also took note that a lot of these happen in older houses. I also noticed that a lot of people were very scared initially, but as it kept happening, they stopped being as scared. I guess after a while, it's kind of just like that guy, you know? You're like, hey Jeff, another day in the realm? And he says nothing because he doesn't have a mouth to talk to you with, and he's just that kind of guy, but hey. So I've considered the fact that maybe these are dead loved ones who are coming to watch after you, or some people believe in like archangels and spirit guides and stuff like that. Maybe this is a manifestation of them. I mean, who knows how much the human eye is really able to perceive, right? Maybe we're not able to perceive their true form and all we can make out is this tall, lanky shadow figure. Another theory that I have, perhaps these are beings just passing by in a parallel universe and they don't even know we're there. However, I do give myself more fault with that one because it seems like they acknowledge us in multiple circumstances. Maybe they are just walking through though. Maybe we're the shadow figures to them. And I know you're thinking, what did you smoke, Null? And I did not. Now, I love the supernatural, so I've been considering many possibilities. These could even be aliens, potentially. And once again, that kind of goes in with my thing I was saying earlier. Who knows what our eyes can actually perceive and pick up? Now, even though my own experience and some of the others I read mentioned being scared initially, or maybe just being scared the whole time, I didn't really see any mentions of waking up with things like bruises or blood on the walls or cryptic writings, which is good. I'm glad that didn't happen. But that leads me to believe that it's not malicious much as like a possession type of situation would be, or a more malicious trickster evil spirit. To me, the stickmen feel kind of lost or just passing through. Or perhaps they're just observing us as we're observing them. For the past few nights before this podcast, I've been trying to prepare, and I haven't seen these shadow men in a while, but before I went to bed, I was thinking, and I was like, if there's anything you guys want me to say on your behalf, like, use me as your medium to say whatever you want to the world. If you don't want me to mention you in this podcast and you don't want me to do this episode, give me a clear sign. And as soon as I woke up, I had the idea of I need to ask people for their stories. And that's when it really felt like this episode was coming together. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. Now, if I had to give you any advice or last notes on the Stickman, I would say try to keep an open mind, because maybe they're not really hostile. Maybe you're just not used to them and it's intimidating. I feel that you can set boundaries with spirits, well, ones that are not very hostile. Personally, I do my own practices to protect my space, and I feel that helps a lot. It's important to be confident whenever you're asserting your boundaries with the spirit. And try not to be rude about it. You know, more like, you are not allowed in my room during the time I am sleeping or changing, or, you know, that's just one example, but it's your boundaries, so you set them how you want to. I would really love to know what you guys think about this episode and about the Stickman, and if there's anything I missed or you wish I would have mentioned, or any theories that you've come up with, please let me know in the comments or message me. I'm more than willing to talk about this all day and all night. In fact, I'm never gonna sleep until I see them again. Maybe that's the key. Maybe if I just never sleep again, I'll see them all the time, and then they can tell me things, and I'll save the world, and you know what? Maybe it's time to go to bed. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. This was Null In The Void, episode 3, discussing the Stickman Phenomena. And keep an eye out. I'm going to be posting about my new website coming out. I've been wanting to put out my own website and be less reliant on the algorithm of Instagram and TikTok and all these little lovely sites that you have to appease the gods in order to get the views, and so your content gets pushed. I'm like, fuck that. I'm making a website with my cool fucking friends. So anyways, keep an eye out for that. Stay safe. Happy Halloween. I hope this is posted by then. I don't know. Have a good one and safe dreams.